All right, very good. It is noon, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Richard Wilson. I am the president of the Ely chapter of Lambda Alpha, and I want to welcome each and every one of you to our May programming. We're so delighted that we are able to restart programming, albeit virtual, in this new world that we know. So thank you so much for carving out some time today to join us. I believe we have about 90 people that are registered and in attendance today, so that's fantastic. I wish we had the technology and ability to show every face. It's so good to see faces, but at the same time, it's very good to know that we're able to gather together in this format. And I do want to just start by wishing everyone well. We're so interested to know how this is impacting people, to know if there's anything that we could do to help one another. We are a land economic society, so certainly we organize around important topics, information exchange, and the social component, but it also means that we're here for one another in times of need, for sure. Related to that, I just wanted to start here to share those who may not have seen this. We do have an online resource here through the Ely chapter, and we are available to provide help and assistance in any way. If you can let us know through this, first of all, welcome you to call me or Brad Ball. Our numbers are here, call anytime, but also we can communicate through the COVID help at elychicago.org. What we're also finding is that individual businesses or sectors of expertise are developing information that's very useful and interesting. So we welcome you to share that information from your various points of view via this website as well. I do want to start by celebrating our sponsors, and I would ask each and every one of these to stand when I call your name, but I'm not certain it's as effective on a web platform. But that said, I certainly appreciate support of my partners at Adrian Smith, Gordon Gill Architecture. Thank you, Kenzie Real Estate Group. Thank you, the Lakota Group. And thank you, SB Friedman, for your sponsorship. At the gold level, thank you very much to W.E. O'Neill. And at the silver level, thank you very much, Foley and Lardner, Freeborn, the great city of Michigan City, Indiana, the Economic Development Corporation, and SCB. I will take just a moment here to note that we have opened a new sponsorship period. Last year, we had 29 sponsors. I believe we are at about 9 this year. And we recognize these are extraordinary times. So thank you for the sponsors that have been able to step forward at this point. I would encourage anyone that may come across sponsorship dollars in coming days to please support the organization in this time of need. I'm certain that the board, we would all support full recognition of a 12-year term of benefit for your sponsorship, and we greatly would appreciate it. On a related note, membership dues are certainly important. We've done so well this year, trending very large in terms of our renewals. We do have some outstanding ones there, so the board will be in contact very soon about that. But just first and foremost, thank everyone for your support for the organization thus far. And also just quickly wanted to acknowledge, above and beyond membership, we have people that volunteer their time. We have a wonderful culture of volunteerism within our organization. So supported by an amazing board of directors that have not only attended business as usual, to the important work of the chapter, but have gone above and beyond in this very unusual time that requires us to be nimble. So I just wanted to recognize people both here the Chicago level, but also through our extensive Lambda Alpha International organization as well. So thank you very much for your time and efforts there. Likewise, we have a number of committees that are very active, again, with this theme of not only business as usual, but being nimble and adjusting to the times we're in. So thank you very much for all the people supporting the Ely chapter in this role. I did want to celebrate that we have a new Speakers Bureau program that we are rolling out in August. We believe this will be an added benefit to our membership, especially in this time where we find a heavy concentration of online meetings, of speaking opportunities. But in the long term, Our goal is to make the general public and fellow organizations aware of the expertise within the Ely chapter, that we provide an online portal so that people can locate speakers around a series of expertise. So we hope to go live with that in August. We will provide more information on the roll-up to that, but we're very excited about it. So thank you very much to the committee. Thank you very much to our committee chair, Peg Blanchard. Thank you very much to Jennifer Tamman. She was the former president and a key initiative of hers, so it's great to see that going forward as well. A couple of more announcements. So as of today, we are on track with the rescheduled initiation banquet, so please save the date at the Peninsula Hotel on Wednesday, October 21st. We'll obviously respond to conditions at that time. But as for now, we're very excited that we were able to renegotiate without penalty to the chapter a rescheduling of this program. And also just want to celebrate our initiate class. I think forever they will go down in history as a unique group of folks that have joined us in this time. So we have 22. I wanted to celebrate them today. All of this will be on the Ely chapter website. So we look forward to the time that we can meet together face-to-face to celebrate the class of 2020. I also want to make you aware that in addition to Ely chapter programming, Lambda Alpha International is using this as an opportunity to interconnect chapters and develop a series of international webinars and discussions across chapters. So the first two are booked, May 27th and June the 3rd. I think where every program that we're going to hear for now for many months to come is going to be a reaction to the COVID pandemic that we find ourselves in. And so these first programs will build upon research by economic and planning systems. It should be very interesting. And then following this, we're actually going to initiate inter-chapter programming. So more to come on that, but information on these programs are available on the LAI website today. So without further ado, just delighted that, again, we were able to start our monthly programming. We will convene on the third Wednesday of each month. And so I want to thank you to the program committee that's listed here. But, as important, I want to put forward a heartfelt call to action that I believe that we all feel we're probably going to be having a higher level of programming, really try to maximize the use of our Zoom and other online communication tools. And so please, if you have ideas to share, if you have time to contribute to the Ely chapter, if you can support the work of this group, or better yet, join the committee, please contact Angela Brooks at the email address highlighted at the bottom of the screen. So today, our program is Housing Market Reactions to the COVID Pandemic, and delighted that Ely chapter member Jewell Walton is the Deputy Chief of Rental Assistance Demonstration Programming at the Chicago Housing Authority, has helped pull the program together, but beyond that, will serve as a moderator. And Jewell, I just want to thank you not only for serving the Ely chapter, but also for the important work that you do at CHA. We know that that doesn't close. It's an essential service and business goes on there. So I'm sure I speak for all of us in the chapter. Thank you very much for the important work that you're doing. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jewell, who will introduce our panelists and frame the program.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Happy to join you, all of you, virtually all 71 of you that are out there in TV land. So as we were discussing what to talk about, we wanted to do something that was obviously current in how we're all facing this pandemic right now. And at the Chicago Housing Authority, my function is housed within the property office. So we meet daily to talk about various things as it relates to the 20,000 households we serve. We're tracking to the extent that it's reported, the COVID cases amongst staff as well as amongst residents. We're tracking different alderman requests and trying to get personal protection equipment, PPE, out to residents and staff, and just trying to increase social distancing, to try to manage the facilitation of visitors throughout our properties. So it's a lot going on and a lot that we have to respond to. And in many cases, we're doing that with more expenses and less money. We have, many residents that are realizing decreases in income or unemployment. Obviously, we're talking about 20 million Americans nationwide that are suffering from unemployment, and certainly that's impacting residents within our properties. So we have instituted rent deferment across all of our properties. And while we have the buffer of having federal subsidy to back that up, there's a lot of housing operators that can't function in that way, or are really struggling. So in talking about how we wanted to frame this panel, we wanted to make sure we obviously had representation from owners and operators throughout the region, but also what's happening within the banking industry, what's happening on the lending side. So I'm very happy to have this expert panel to discuss kind of some of their perspective and insights of what they've seen. So beginning with Charlton Hamer, he's a senior vice president of the Habitat company, Habitat Affordable Group. He oversees many of our properties and just awarded. So congratulations, Charlton, on receiving our senior portfolio in full, as well as our tax credit properties. So he manages more than 9,000 units or so for the Chicago Housing Authority, as well as oversees other affordable housing throughout the Chicago region. Also joining us is Robert Bollhoffer, Managing Principal and Director of Operations with 29th Street Capital, has a variety of different products within his portfolio, including affordable and student housing. And then also, last but not least, the money woman. We had to bring her on, Vicky, Arroyo, Executive Vice President of Commercial Real Estate at Bank Financial. She brings expansive experience within the banking industry, working with MB Financial previously, and is going to talk about some of the things that she's seen over the last several weeks due to the pandemic on the multifamily and lending side. So starting off, we decided we wanted to have each participant and panelists give their 5-minute elevator speech as to what they're seeing and what their perspective has been thus far, given this pandemic. So starting off with Charlton. Charlton, what have you seen? What's been your experience thus far?
That's all I have is 5 minutes?
Oh, well, we'll get it.
No, I'm joking. Well, I've seen a lot. So I would really want to put it into perspective of kind of what I do, how I work, and how things have affected our portfolio. Jewell, thank you for the introduction. Yes, the Habitat Company is developer and property manager. We serve in several different disciplines, from high-end market rate luxury rental to condo to traditional affordable. And a traditional affordable, I kind of define as properties that were developed with equity from low-income housing tax credits, and along with that, coupled with rental subsidy for the residents operation. And then last but not least, we have a substantial public housing portfolio. And so we've developed in all classes, we manage in all classes. Out of the 23,000 units that we manage in 6 different states, our affordable portfolio is currently 13,000, a little over 13,000. As Jewell said, we'll be moving into another 1,000, 1,500 units by August. According to the National Affordable Housing Management Association, we're in the top 100 affordable managers in the country. And so I head up Habitat's affordable group, and so my responsibility is two-sided, both from a development standpoint. We have a couple of large redevelopment projects with the Housing Authority right now. One is actually in the ground under construction, and so a good thing that during this pandemic we haven't experienced significant delays with that. We also have a project that we're working on that was just awarded tax credits from the city of Chicago, 9% credits. That project is in the Bronzeville, Grand Boulevard area, and then we also have a project that we're working on in the Bronx in New York. On our property management side, I've been intimate with our operations. We've experienced a great deal. Obviously, within the affordable realm, we're dealing with a number of different residents who, outside of the pandemic itself, had a number of different needs from both a social and an economic level. And so, with the pandemic, it has compounded those issues, and of course, added significant others. On March 13th, of course, the President of the United States declared a national state of emergency. Subsequent to that, the governors of California and New York and then they issued executive orders for shelter in place. And then I think on March 21st, the governor of Illinois issued somewhat the same. We far before even the issuance of a state of emergency from the president, we started looking at the spread of the pandemic. We started getting information not only from the federal government, state government, also the CDC. And at that time, we started formulating a work action plan of how we would engage with residents, how our operations would be curtailed based upon the shelter in place. We felt and knew, and it was echoed, and it's in the executive orders that really our on-site team members from an administrative and a maintenance and janitorial standpoint would be essential to the services of the residents in our buildings, and that rang true. I will say that they are on the front line, and they are engaging residents as any other health professional would, and they need to be they are appreciated by not only us as a company, but they really need to be appreciated by everyone. The multifamily industry, again, is at the forefront of serving people throughout the country. So with our work and action plan that we put together and we formulated, we looked at a number of different things. One, from a resident standpoint, the social and economic well-being during the pandemic. And then secondly, really the mitigation of the spread of the virus, not only to the residents, but our team members as well. We wanted our team members to be and feel safe as they address the needs of the residents on the front line. And so with that, we looked at a number of different issues, looked at best practices throughout the industry, looked at recommendations from the CDC, formulated a plan in regards to social distancing. Very early on, we started closing some of the areas where residents congregate, fitness facilities, community space. Unfortunately, it was we did receive some initial pushback from residents, but I don't think that's no longer the issue. We've revised this plan on several occasions based upon policy coming from not only the federal government but the state as well. One of those with the issue of face coverings in public places. We've tried to address really the anxiety of residents at this point in time from a social aspect. Residents are concerned about who comes into the building, how they're coming into the building. Are they wearing masks? Do they have the proper PPE? Can they come into a designated area? We've dealt with and addressed the issue of uh, in the affordable realm. We often talk about that there's high touch activity in the affordable realm. Usually in the market rate world, people are accustomed to communicating electronically. They're accustomed to electronic transactions. Not necessarily so in the affordable world to a certain extent. Families, younger families, yes. Seniors, absolutely not as a whole. Now, seniors primarily need that physical engagement, and unfortunately, we're unable to do that now. So we put measures in place really to take care of issues of social distancing, cleanliness throughout the buildings, ensuring our team members had the proper personal protection equipment. With our senior population, along with CHA and the Family Works, making sure and contacting the seniors because they don't have this daily engagement with some of their peers, and to try to ensure their well-being during this process. Outside of the housing authority, we've actually gone to the extent of providing each property with a signage, again, ensuring that people are adhering to some of the safety issues that have come down from the CDC, limiting the number of people in elevators, limiting the number of people in the lobby and common spaces, limiting our access to units, at least with the CHA and a number of our buildings outside of the housing authority. We're really only addressing emergency work orders, which we call service requests. If they are urgent in manner, not necessarily an emergency, we're deciding whether we should go in or not. We have a plan as far as how our maintenance and janitorial staff actually go into each unit, and how they sanitize themselves and clean their area and disinfect the area that they've been working in. We've elevated the issues of consistency of cleaning all of the common areas, in even to the extent where we need to actually bring a third party in to sterilize. We'll talk about that a little bit later as far as an economic concern, but these are some of the things that we're experiencing. We look at it really outside of CHA, in our affordable developments from a property by property issue. Some residents are extremely concerned. The level of anxiety is very high. We have to spend a great deal of time in communicating to those residents about what we're doing. Many of them want to go well beyond some of the CDC recommendations, and in some cases, making sure that everybody who's coming into the building is their temperature is taken, and a number of different other things that are they would like to have. But I think we've been able to kind of make sure that we've put their anxiety at ease within all of our portfolio. From an economic standpoint, I believe.
Charlton, make sure, because we got a few questions that are targeted about the kind of economics. And,
okay, that's fine.
Make that part of the moderated discussion. But one of the interesting things that I heard you say is essentially addressing the digital divide. You mentioned that in affordable housing realm, that is a kind of very high touch, and people want to be able to interact with staff and hear their questions addressed, especially within our senior population. I'm just curious as to Rob, you deal with students as well as workforce, and maybe I didn't catch if you did senior, but I'm wondering from an operating standpoint, what have you seen and what adjustments have you made during this pandemic?
Yeah, so we immediately locked everything down. So amenities, we closed. Leasing center, we only did, we limited the people that were allowed in the clubhouse. And then our maintenance, like Charlton said, was only for emergency work orders. Doing that, some of the results we saw were, we've done a lot of virtual tours. So our surprise, what that's created is there's not as many shoppers. So rather than touring 10 properties, we get, maybe now you tour 2, and our conversion rate is much higher.
Yeah.
So that's one thing we've seen. We're starting to look into touchless stores. Huge industry there that, now will become more common. We are actually, we haven't officially closed business. We've given people hazard pay to continue leasing, but what we've seen right away is if we worked with our residents, continually updated them on, what the community's doing, what to do best, and provide them some type of non-emergency essentials, light bulbs, air filters. We gave those a free in our clubhouse, and they were pretty understanding, right? It's difficult times. And so what we did is we noticed that unintentionally built goodwill, and our retention rate has been close to 90%. People are not buying homes right now. They don't want to go shop. So as long as you're fair on the renewal, we've kept everyone's rent flat. And we've just noticed that our operations have done pretty well. Everyone views it collections. Our collections are 96%. So, and everyone thought this workforce housing would get hurt. And, we have A product, B product, and C product. And everyone, from New York was saying C product is going to get hurt. That's the demographic that works in this retail. We do have exposure to Vegas, Houston, and Orlando, which everyone was very nervous of, but that's held on really well. The CARES Act, unemployment, those people really got raises. So we've actually seen our C product do very well. A products held on great. Everyone could usually work from home. And then B product, where, you're a dental assistant, you got unemployed, well, you don't qualify for CARES Act. That product type has been our worst performer. So that's what we're seeing in the market right now.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you for that, Rob. That note here about just what you're seeing different regions. I know you said a little while ago that you had gotten out of the Chicago market. Are you seeing just regionally, is it having an impact on one area versus another?
Yeah, so we exited Chicago 24 months. We're very concerned about many issues in Illinois. I'm sure most of you guys can guess why. But we went into capital cities with an OL. So getting more aggressive in Sacramento, Phoenix, Denver, Austin, Texas, areas of that. And we do feel like healthcare, schools, and just the capital, those are going to be hiring very soon. If not, they're hiring already. So we think that's a good downside protection. And that's been our target. Areas with high pensions, let's face it, sales are down, income's down. It's pretty scary what's going to happen.
Yeah. So Vicky, I'd like to ask you, just from the lending side, what are you seeing? How are you interacting with borrowers? Are you seeing folks come in already asking about restructuring? Are you seeing late payments? What are you seeing on your end? Oh, I think you're still on mute.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
So it's interesting to hear the perspective of the previous speakers because they're dealing directly with the tenants at a tenant level. So my perspective is a little bit different because the people I'm working with are the landlords and the property owners. We started early on, as soon as, probably mid-March, we started taking calls from customers that were concerned about what was to come. And, you know, quickly the bank put together a couple of forbearance options for landlords at various levels, you know, both at the smaller, you know, 6 flat, 8 flat, because, you know, as I mentioned earlier in my introduction, that we have a large percentage of multifamily properties that makes up the majority of our portfolio. So the housing market is very near and dear to our hearts. So we really took a proactive approach to try to have a program set up where, you know, customers can choose whether they wanted to defer payments. So we opened up the lines, we started getting phone calls, we put together a task team that was taking all these inbound calls from customers and organized ourselves where we were, you know, tracking them. Because at the end of the day, what was still fluid is how the regulators, you know, as everybody knows, the banks are federally regulated. So we can't just go and, you know, make our own rules. We have to make sure that whatever we're doing is not going to cause problems for the bank later, because, you know, we have to be concerned about what type of capital requirements they're going to ask, and if a loan is considered a troubled asset, because typically they don't allow restructures. The rule of thumb has always been, if anything changes from what you originally projected with a loan, it's considered a classified loan if anything changes. So with this changing, you know, I think the regulators through the CARES Act provided the banks some leniency, but not very clear as to how they'll treat these later on in the year. So we were cautious with that and had conversations with our customers as far as, you know, deferral of interest. Some of them needed just, you know, principal deferment. Some of them wanted to skip a payment. So we've been working with them and, you know, completed all of that effective for the April payments that were going to be due, anticipating, you know, late payments. And surprisingly enough, we didn't have any over 30-day payments. Everybody was able to make their payments either through a reduced loan payment structure or just make their full payments. I have to say that surprisingly for May, we are seeing the same. May was the month where we allowed a lot of our borrowers to skip a payment. We've been dealing with the opposite, where, you know, they are allowed to skip it, but they're calling us saying, hey, I got my payment, I'm going to make it, you know. So that's been positive, I think, and helpful for not only the banks, but also to the landlords, mostly because otherwise, if they didn't have enough reserves, they, you know, they were really the ones that we had on the line that were concerned about how they would be able to, you know, take on. I think what we're anticipating, so, you know, as I said, for April and May, collections have been very strong. We are really now having conversations with customers because our forbearance programs went for April, May, June, July. And I think that, you know, we're having a lot of our borrowers calling us back saying, well, what about July and August? Because, you know, I think everybody's kind of waiting to see when things open up and businesses are in motion, like how many of them will keep their employees and how many will be permanently, you know, lose jobs. And then, so we feel like there might be a second wave of uncertainty for people in the July and August months.
Okay, no, it makes sense. No, if you can answer this more directly, Vicky, but you know, and being in Chicago, in the Chicagoland area, we have a lot of properties that are owned by kind of the mom and pop operators versus the larger scale that are more capitalized. Are you seeing any differences in the call volume? Is it more mom and pop folks that are asking about this? Do you see even the bigger guys asking for some adjustments?
You know, it's interesting, and that's why we came up with 2 forbearance programs, because one was geared to the mom and pops and the other one was geared to the larger corporations. I think for the larger landlords, a lot of them had reserves for the most part. So they felt that, you know, the reserves could handle it, and they really didn't want to skip a payment because they were afraid that it might look negatively if they want to continue to do business and so forth. So for the most part, the larger ones seem to be, you know, okay for now, and it is the smaller ones, particularly the smaller ones in areas where, you know, I had one that had an 8-unit and said, you know, every all of my tenants were Uber drivers, restaurant workers, you know, it was a gamut where he said nobody's paid. So we had a handful of those, luckily not too many, but we did have some where, you know, that just made up the, you know, largest percentage of their tenant base, and they were most affected. So we're working with them, you know, to try to see if we can, we actually even came up with some, you know, I mean, somebody mentioned Illinois and the real estate taxes. We came up with a separate product where we are allowing them to, you know, get a second or a third mortgage at a very, you know, nominal interest rate, but giving them 30, you know, an interest only period to pay for their real estate taxes, because those are coming up to, and nobody's forgiven those yet. So we're, you know, some customers had, you know, a larger portion of their monthly payment that was their real estate escrow amount, especially for, you know, and I know we're not talking about commercial, but even on the residential side, in some certain areas, their real estate taxes are very high. So we needed to, you know, make an accommodation for them. And we put together a facility where we're lending them payment and allowing them to pay us back over a 4-year period.
Okay. Okay. So now that we're into the money conversation, just to kind of recap, we've talked a lot about people and what impacts this is having on residents, especially from you, Charlton, and Rob on this. So I think we might have talked a lot about the people aspect, but let's talk a bit about the property and on the operating budget. So Charlton, I know that's somewhere you were beginning. So can you talk about economically how that's having an impact? What do you see in terms of increases in expenses? And, you know, I'm anticipating there's going to be some decreases in revenues. How are you staying afloat?
So one thing I think we all need to be reminded of is that even though, you know, March seems like a year away right now, just based upon how things have evolved, we're still really early on in the process, definitely in regards to how they're affecting each of the sites. Obviously, there's some things that we look at, and Rob talked about collections. I think that we kind of mirror what you're going through, Rob, as far as the Habitat company. But one thing I will say that in regards to workforce housing, you know, on the upper end of those who are on area median income, I think we're still about the same as far as the mid-90s are concerned as far as collection rates. On the affordable, they're bolstered by rental subsidy that's coming in, and the federal government is trying to expedite that. But those who are kind of outside of that subsidized affordable realm, those people who are in that 60% to 120% area median income, those people who were non-essential as far as their vocation was concerned, were in the service industry. Those are the people that we're finding who are most acutely affected as of now. Those are the people who in a number of cases that have been laid off or furloughed, and we are working with them and working with everybody under payment plans. I think you know, we all know that here in the Cook County and Chicago area, there's a stay in housing courts. The housing courts are not open. There's no eviction. There's a moratorium on evictions with under HUD products, and so we're working with individuals as far as payment plans. But that's the area that we're really most affected by. I mean, there's a number of different things on the revenue side that are affecting our sites. One, you know, we've already talked about collections. There's been a dip there throughout each class, I would say, but not substantial in the two that I mentioned previously. But the ancillary revenue, the revenue that we generate for parking and laundry, mixed-use properties which are retail that are closed. Those are affecting our revenue streams as well. From an operations standpoint, we've got a significant amount of PPEs that we're dealing with our team members, and cleaning supplies. And depending upon what goes on in the building and what needs to be done, third parties that are coming in and taking care of the disinfectant as well. We, Fannie and Freddie and HUD products, yes, Vicky, there's the possibility of forbearance. In some cases, companies have taken the opportunity on behalf of owners to be involved in the 3P program and be able to kind of offset some of the salary expenses for each of the properties. But again, I think we're very early on, and we'll have to see how things open up. There won't be, we're just not magically going to open up and things are going to be back to normal. It's going to be a very dissimilar period for a very long time. I think one last thing, and why Rob is probably laughing at all of us who still remain here in the Chicago area and Cook County. There's great uncertainty with real estate taxes. The mayor had her pledge, and everybody really wants to work, not only the owners, the lenders, to provide relief to our residents. But there's relief that's needed on the real estate tax side. I've heard that there's a possibility of no penalty if properties address their taxes late this year, no extra, no fees. There's a possibility there, but I think, as we go forward, there needs to be a better solution to what we're experiencing now.
So Rob, just wanted to know if you had a few more points about that. You mentioned the Class B is kind of that mid-tier that's kind of suffering right now. From an asset management perspective and the money side and reserves, how are you making adjustments to accommodate that loss?
Yeah, we're a little more optimistic. I think, I'm sure they don't think it's going to be a V, but I don't think it'll be an extended U curve. We're seeing economies open back up. Anyone sub, $67,000 is kind of your break even. Anyone that was paid below that, the government stepped up and subsidized that. So they technically got a pay raise. We're seeing those people do pretty well. Regarding expenses, that was your question, but our leasing is much lower, so we're not paying the marketing dollars. We're only doing essential or emergency work orders. So our expenses really have dropped. And income's, flat to slightly down. So we're doing okay. And like Charlton said, there is some government assist on the Freddie side, but we're a select sponsor, and they've only taken back 4 loans, and they're, how many millions of loans they have. So, we don't see the distress like everyone has. We're pretty, we're in, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but we've kind of shorted Chicago, and we're seeing people migrate out of the Midwest. They like better weather. This has expedited their decision to move out.
Sadly, that's the truth.
Yeah, unfortunate. But I think we all know the reality of living here, of what we're facing. So Vicky, I'm going to jump a little bit ahead. So we're already seeing an economic downturn of sorts, and I think you're probably best suited out of all of us to, get your crystal ball. Do you think, given the request of going out into July and August at this point, are we looking at a potential mortgage-backed security, crash like we did in 2008? What are your thoughts? Oh, you're on mute again.
Sorry. I think that there's been some, discussion on that already, comparing this economic downturn to, or the potential of it to what we lived, in 2007, 2008, that took such a long time to recover. I think that we're in different places. I think even on the banking side, and, we, as I mentioned earlier, we have a national presence as well in our lending platform. So we're in various states as well, and also work with capital market partners to place some of our loans, that are larger for us. So I see a spectrum of, not only the capital markets, but, the Fannie Freddie and the appetite, and keep a close pulse on that. I think that everybody is feeling more confident than they were, you know, in 2007 and 2008, because I think everybody was being a little bit more prudent in their underwriting and their structures and stressing. So everything that resulted from that downturn, I think has, you know, everybody in better positions. You know, as I mentioned earlier, even our landlords, you know, I feel like everybody was a little bit more conservative. We didn't see as many highly leveraged landlords out there. There was adequate reserve. So I think that with all of those things in place, even if there is a bit of a downturn, we are being optimistic that, you know, it's, you know, we're still lending. We're, you know, for a little bit, we brought our loan to values down to, I think, 70% loan to value on multifamily. And then quickly, within maybe 2 weeks, once we started seeing the collections of March and April, we went back up to 75%. So, you know, we're also underwriting other parameters within the, you know, we're verifying collections of April and May payments on properties that, you know, are out there. But we're seeing an increase in purchases right now, which surprised us. We thought that would be quiet for a while. And our pipeline is very strong right now, particularly around purchases of multifamily properties. So I feel like there's just, again, there's an optimism. We're stressing them a little bit, you know, a tad bit harsher, probably not as harsh because we were already, you know, conservative. But I think that, you know, you know, we don't think that, you know, and like I said, the CARES Act and, you know, the talks about another one, I think the government and all the leaders have done a nice job at trying to quarterback that. So we have an optimistic crystal ball view of what might come, you know, over the next, you know, between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, the key, Jewell, you know, the one thing that Vicky said that's important is, you know, people don't have to pay their rent now, right? It just gets tacked down to the end of your lease. But we're asking tenants, you know, why, and you know, not trying to be too obvious, but, you know, why are you paying? And it's very dissimilar from 08. 08, no one knew how long it would last. Mm-hmm. Right. This time, people say, hey, 60 days, I'll be back to work, 90, pick a day. There is an end in sight. So they've worked 5 years, 6 years, 7 years to repair their credit. They're not going backwards. Mm-hmm. They're staying current, and they're going to go, hey, you know, this will be over. It's just, you know, you can disagree when.
Got it. Okay. I see you're on, Brad. So are we
yeah, we're at about 12:45 right now. So we have one question that's in right now, and maybe we can share it around to the panelists. And then again, everyone, attendees, please feel invited to submit your questions via the Q&A function down at the bottom of your Zoom menu. So John DeVries as asking, are travel restrictions impacting management or development for assets in other regions or cities, or is online compensating?
I mean, I can answer a little since we're acquiring deals right now. It surely hasn't been easy, and this is where a local platform is huge. So we're having our guys tour the assets. Freddie, as you know, has done a 9-month principal interest and taxes reserve. So their view is, hey, we can't get the inspectors in, so we're just going to have a big escrow, assuming that you won't overpay that much. So it has surely been difficult. We're doing sample tours and inspections, so it's not as much as we typically do. But you know, I don't think it's an economic crisis, right? It's a health crisis for sure. But the lenders are still lending, and people are still paying. So we're a little more optimistic than most.
You know, I'd have to echo those sentiments as well. We're chasing a couple deals that are outside of the Chicago area, and I did talk about the development that we have in the Bronx. But there we do have a partner that has a local presence, and so that hasn't been an issue. Yes, from a standpoint of getting our team members to a site to do inspections on properties that we're looking at acquiring that we want to do significant value add with, that is posing a problem. But it's also posing a problem here in the city as well, where we have a presence as far as getting into the units and getting on site. So it's the same thing, whether it be here or somewhere else. I will say, I wasn't the greatest proponent of working away from the away from the office. But what has transpired over this period of time, as far as electronic communication and feedback, has been tremendous. I think that will change throughout the industry to a certain extent, and it actually has helped us continue on with all of our development, acquisition, and property management activities.
Okay. Any others, Brad?
No, we do not have any more. So if you had any from your original set, or if you want to pass it around for maybe final thoughts, I'll leave it up to you, Jewell.
Yeah, I have actually one final question before we get to final thoughts. So hopefully we have all learned something from this experience, that we anticipate going into some sort of new normal. And Charlton, you were kind of getting to the last question that I had in this, and just not being a proponent for virtual working and teleworking, and now seeing the upside and benefits to it. So just either as part of your final thoughts, or just, the address to your question directly, knowing what you know now, and obviously there's a lot to be learned going forward, what would you do differently in your line of business?
I again, in affordable operations, it is, we try to look at best practices throughout all the classes that we serve in. Obviously, with the market rate, there's the electronic communication and transactions, from everything as far as rent pay to dealing with service requests. And that now, during this period of time, has a great deal of efficiency on the market rate end. We've constantly talked about it as far as the affordable. We have the capacity, not only in traditional affordable, but with CHA as well. There are various different platforms that CHA uses right now that we could sort of install or implement that. And I think that we've always been reluctant because of the nature of the high touch activities of affordable housing. But I think now is a time when we need to use, unfortunately, we need to use this pandemic to make sure that our residents come into the realm of electronic transactions and communications to greater the efficiency and now for their own safety in many regards.
Rob?
I think it's going to be
maybe it's not much you'll change, because you're pretty optimistic and seem to be faring pretty well, but maybe there is some stuff.
Yeah, what we're fearful of are elevators. We are getting away from, we don't do a lot of CBD business, but I would be concerned if you had an elevator in a CBD. I think there's going to be a short-term migration away from CBD. People working from home, larger units. Your kid that just graduated college is not getting a job. So where are they going, right? I think they're going to move home. I think larger units, you're working from home, will be a big thing. And I think home buying is going to be tough, right? The supply is going to be more strained. And so that pricing is going to go up for sure. So I think, multifamily, larger units, kind of first ripple outside the CBD is the product type I want to be in.
No, it's actually very interesting. I've talked about that in my personal life with husband and friends and such. It's like, are we going to see shifts within, we saw this migration, certainly in Chicago, of coming into the downtown environment. And with, especially folks that have small children, with parks being closed, are you going to see this migration outward?
Yeah, but I would look at it on a region by region basis. So I worked in New York City during 9/11 and Sandy Hook, and Hurricane Sandy. And in each case, there was the thought that people would be moving away from the highly dense areas of New York. There was some of that happened and that occurred initially after 9/11, but then shortly thereafter, everybody moved back. I think in a place where you have less density and less of that CBD living culture, like you do in Chicago, even though it's here. You might find that in some other cities as well, like a Denver. But I think places like San Francisco and Chicago, or excuse me, in New York, and some of its outer boroughs very close to Manhattan, you're still going to have people gravitating towards living in the higher density areas.
Yeah, I mean, I can, you know, we're in all those markets, and I'm seeing the complete opposite. San Francisco, they're moving to Sacramento. They're not going to pay $8 a foot in rent. They're gone. Their school systems in CBD are typically not very good, so they're going to go into residentials with, you know, where there's better schools, and they're going to try to save. They're going to get a larger unit and save money. So San Francisco is just, the days of, you know, being the most expensive city, I think, are over.
But remember, it's been that some of that has been happening over a long period of time. But yet and still, if you look at the population of San Francisco, it's still grown. And the same thing with the city of New York. Over a 20-year period, there hasn't been a dip in population in the city of New York, and you could say that for the island of Manhattan.
Yeah, I think
Yes,
what I would anticipate here in Chicago is that, you know, what I've been hearing is corporations and what will follow for them, especially in a metropolitan area like Chicago, where a lot of colleagues, even in the banking industry, like you said, maybe couldn't imagine working from home. And now, you know, a lot of companies are realizing that it's more effective. They don't need to spend that office. So a lot of people that may have lived in the city to be close to work and you know, improve their commute, that if they're able to just work from home, they may have more choices on where they want to live.
Brad, I just happened to see in the chat that there's another question. Did you want to pose it?
Yeah, we did get one more question if we want to try and squeeze it in real quick. I know we're shooting for a tight 1 o'clock close. Lindsay Sorrell asks if someone can address what they see the impacts might be down the line if mortgage terms are revised, especially for the first-time buyers with the drive for larger units.
I mean, I can't predict that. Go ahead, Vicky, you're in banking.
No, I mean, if I'm understanding correctly, what I think people are concerned that if they take some type of modification currently, if I'm reading this correctly, that there might be impacts for them later if they want to go and buy a larger house. I think that's how I'm reading it. But I guess, you know, from what we have heard from both the regulators and the banks and in the banking industry, both on the consumer and the commercial side, anybody that takes any type of forbearance or deferral program currently, there will be no impact on their credit score. There's, you know, a lot of banks are waiving late fees, you know, from March until, you know, indefinitely at this point, at least July or August. And so there should not be any negative you know, connotation to your credit ability in the future if you took any type of relief during the period of time.
I think I'll take it from here. I wanted, you know, we had fantastic discussion, great questions, but we also had a very special request, perhaps appropriate to take us out, and that was from Mr. Ty Warner asking that Charlton get on those conga drums and do a number for us before we go out. So perhaps we'll get to that, but I do certainly want to thank you to our panelists, Charlton, Rob, Vicky, Jewell, fantastic job moderating. We know this is the first of many, many discussions around this important issue. I have a job to do as the Ely chapter president from this great region we're in. I have to tell you, Chicago is one of the most wonderful, livable cities on the world. I have access to talent that I cannot get in any other city around the world. Our transportation network and location make us strong. So I appreciate all of this competitive talk about other cities and capital cities and the like. Folks in the Chicago area, we may have challenges, but we have strengths that we're going to continue to build upon. So with that, I want to thank everyone so much for joining us today. Mark your calendar, June 17th. We'll be joined by Deputy Mayor Samir Maikar, perhaps others from the city. So we will talk about Chicago's path towards an equitable recovery. And the last request is when you log out today, there is a very short survey function. We would really appreciate it if you would take 1 minute and give us some direct feedback so we can continue to improve our process. So again, join with me to give our fantastic panel a great round of applause, and we look forward to seeing you in the very near future. Thank you.
Thank you.